LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESTS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. It's Sunday, December 13th, and on your screen is a live view of the Falcon 9 awaiting its 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm a senior certification engineer here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Welcome to our webcast coverage for the launch of SiriusXM's SXM-7 satellite. For those of you who tuned in to our webcast earlier in the week, today marks our second attempt to launch the SXM-7 satellite. During our previous attempt, a hold was called due to a potential issue on the ground system side. The vehicle and payload remain healthy, and the Falcon 9 team has completed a thorough review, and we are go for today's launch. Now, if you're tuning in for the first time, you may know SiriusXM for its ad-free, curated music channels, or for its use of satellites to provide users with digital audio radio services. Today, to replace existing satellite services, SpaceX will launch the company's next-generation high-power broadcasting satellite, SXM-7. Following today's launch, the SXM-7 payload will join 5 other satellites in SiriusXM's active satellite fleet. After joining the fleet, there's an expectation that the payload will replace the XM-3 satellite to help ensure continuous and reliable delivery of SiriusXM's audio entertainment and data services to consumers in the United States. This effort will also help SiriusXM expand services to consumers in Canada and the Caribbean. Today's launch marks the 25th SpaceX mission of 2020 and the 7th flight for this particular booster, which is always exciting. Let's take a closer look at the vehicle for today's mission. There on your screen, you see our Falcon 9 rocket on the launch pad located in Cape Canaveral, cycling through its launch day processes in preparation for its 12:30 p.m. Eastern liftoff. Falcon 9 is a 2-stage liquid-fueled launch vehicle and stands about 229 feet or 70 meters tall, which is equivalent of about 12 giraffes stacked on top of each other. The bottom 2/3 of the vehicle is what we call the first stage. As I mentioned earlier, it will be taking flight for the 7th time today. The first stage is responsible for accelerating the vehicle all the way to the edge of space, after which it will separate from the second stage, carrying the SXM-7 payload. Once separation is complete, we'll attempt to recover the first stage on our drone ship, which you see right there on your screen. Just read the instructions. It's currently holding position in the Atlantic Ocean a couple hundred miles off the coast of Florida. If we stick the landing today, it will mark our 69th successful booster recovery. After the first and second stage separate, the second stage will ignite its single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC engine, to carry the SXM-7 satellite to a highly elliptical orbit. Separation from second stage will occur about 4,000 kilometers above Earth, and then the satellite will perform burns using its own onboard thruster to raise its position to enter a circular medium Earth orbit, or MEO, and reach an apogee of about 20,200 kilometers above Earth. If you look at the top of the Falcon 9 rocket there, you see a nose cone-shaped object. That's the payload fairing. Housed inside is the SXM-7 satellite. The fairing measures 17 feet, or about 5 meters in diameter, and 43 feet, or about 13 meters tall. The payload fairing protects the satellite from aerodynamic heating, loads, and contamination during ascent. Once we get through the Earth's atmosphere and reach the vacuum of space, the payload will no longer need that protection. We'll jettison the fairing halves so we don't have to carry around that extra weight, and the second stage will continue with the satellite to its targeted drop-off orbit. One fairing half used during today's mission is taking its first flight, while the other is being flown for the second time. That particular half previously supported the Anassys 2 mission back in July of this year. Due to upgrades on our recovery vessel, Ms. Chief, We'll instead retrieve one of the fairing halves with our recovery vessel Go Searcher and attempt to catch the other using our recovery vessel Ms. Tree. The large gray structure that you see there next to Falcon 9 is the Transporter Erector, or TE. The TE is used to roll out the Falcon 9 from the hangar to the launch pad and raise it to its vertical launch position. The TE also routes power, fluids, and communication to both the rocket and satellite. Our countdown continues to progress smoothly toward our 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so let's take a closer look at today's payload. Weighing in at almost 7,000 kilograms and over 100 feet long when its solar arrays are deployed, the 27-foot tall SXM-7, built on Maxar's 1300 class platform, is designed to provide service for more than 15 years. This satellite's unique design also features a large unfurlable S-band reflector to broadcast audio and data signals to users on the ground. By joining SiriusXM's already active fleet, the SXM-7 will deliver the highest power density of any commercial satellite on orbit. This new satellite will send more than 8,000 watts of content to the continental United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbean, which in turn provides users with a better signal quality and broader reach. Now, as the clock countdown continues for our on-time liftoff of 12:30 p.m. Eastern, let's take a moment to learn a little bit more about the SXM-7. Prior to the start of our webcast, our Falcon 9 team performed functional checkouts for the SXM-7 satellite. At T-minus 38 minutes, the team concluded their electronic go, no-go poll and gave the OK to proceed into propellant load and launch. To keep the propellant on both stages of the vehicle cooled as much as possible close to launch, the team at Cape Canaveral began that propellant load at T-minus 35 minutes. Since the second stage Merlin engine is very similar to the first stage engines, both first and second stage engines get to use the same propellant. Our fuel is a refined form of kerosene known as Rocket Propellant 1, or RP1, and our oxidizer is super chilled liquid oxygen, LOX. We chill the liquid oxygen to be as cold as we can get it, which allows us to load more LOX and makes it super dense with oxygen molecules. Both of these things give us better performance with the Merlin engines. This also helps us to avoid the need to continue topping LOX up. This also helps us to avoid needing to top off that liquid oxygen to make up for losses due to boiling. At this point in time, both the first and second stages are fully loaded with RP1. The first stage will be complete. Actually, it looks like we're approaching completion of load of LOX on first stage, and also at this time, liquid oxygen loading is continuing on second stage. The pre-valves between the first stage engines and the propellant tanks are open. At T-minus 7 minutes, we performed what is called engine chill. This is where we cool the turbo pumps in order to avoid thermal shocks when we start those turbo pumps up at T-minus 2 seconds in order to light the Merlin engines. At this point, we're also loading helium into storage vessels on the first and second stages. And you can see on your screen there, the cradle around the fairing has just moved a little bit, retracting and making way for launch. During flight, as I mentioned, we're loading helium into the first and second stages. During flight, we'll pass that cold helium through the heat exchangers on the Merlin engines. The heat of the gas generator exhaust turns that cold helium into hot helium, therefore expanding it. And that expanded helium gas is then used to fill the empty volume in the propellant tanks caused by the engine pumps pulling the propellant out of the stages. And it looks like we had a little bit of retraction there of the strong back. That is essentially just moving back a little bit, about 2 degrees into the pre-launch position, 2 degrees away from the rocket. At liftoff, hydraulics will move that TE into a position 45 degrees away from the rocket. At this point in time, the first stage propellant loading is complete for LOX and fuel. The second stage fuel loading is complete, and the LOX loading will complete at T-minus 2 minutes. 1 minute before liftoff, you'll hear the announcement that Falcon 9 is in startup. This announcement means that the rocket's own internal computers are now controlling the launch countdown on Falcon 9. Once the engines are confirmed to be at full power, the flight computer on the second stage will command the ground hold downs to release the rocket right at T0. The satellite team continues to monitor the status and health of the SXM-7 located inside the fairing on top of the second stage. All systems continue to be go on the satellite. As of right now, as we just passed through the T-minus 2 minute mark, where everything appears to be on track for an on-time launch today. The range status is green, and of course we've been monitoring the weather. Today's primary concern was the cumulus cloud rule, but as we can see there from our shot of the pad on your screen, beautiful blue skies there in Florida. Conditions are looking favorable at both the launch site and recovery zone. If for some reason we have to call a hold on today's launch, we have a backup opportunity tomorrow with a liftoff time scheduled about the same time. But for now, all systems continue to be go for a liftoff at 12:30 p.m. Eastern.
F9's in startup.
So there we heard the call out. F9 is in startup, meaning that the flight computers have taken control of the launch countdown for Falcon 9. First and second stages are beginning to pressurize for launch. The white clouds that you see there is just...
LD is go for launch.
There we heard the final call. LD is go for launch. Everything looking good for an on-time liftoff today. Let's listen in on the final seconds of the countdown.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, and we have liftoff.
Stage 1 propulsion nominal.
Vehicle's pitching downrange.
We're now 30 seconds into flight, and Falcon 9 is preparing to pass through max Q, which will happen at T+1 minute and 12 seconds. For those of you that might be unfamiliar with this term, max Q is when the vehicle will experience the greatest amount of dynamic pressure. Call out there that everything is looking nominal for first stage. To prepare for max Q, we throttle the engines down and then back up about 20 seconds later. And this helps ensure that we keep those dynamic pressures below a certain level.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
So there we heard the call out that the vehicle is now going faster than the speed of sound.
Vehicle is experiencing maximum dynamic pressure.
So there we heard the call out that the vehicle is passing through max Q. Again, that's the moment in which the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of dynamic pressure, greatest amount that it'll see throughout flight. Now in just a few seconds, we'll hear the call out that MVAC chill has begun. Just like we did on the M1D engines for first stage, we open the pre-valves between the propellant tanks and the turbopumps, allow some of that super chilled liquid oxygen to cool down the turbopump hardware. There we go. So MVAC chill has begun. So that super chilled liquid oxygen is flowing through the turbopumps, allowing them to cool off prior to full flow of propellant. Everything is looking good with stage 1 trajectory. Coming up, we're going to have 3 events happening in quick succession. We're going to have main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation and SES1, or second engine start 1. Main engine cutoff coming up in 3 seconds.
And Miko.
Stage separation confirmed.
All right, there on your screen we have confirmation of stage separation as well as MVAC ignition.
Good MVAC ignition.
Great view there of planet Earth rotating behind the first stage, which is on the left-hand side of your screen, and the second stage on the right-hand side. So on the left-hand side, we can see those grid fins beginning to deploy into the landing position. Those grid fins will be utilized to help steer Falcon 9 for a precise landing on our drone ship, which, like I mentioned earlier, is positioned a couple hundred miles.
On a nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectory there for Falcon 9. As I said, those grid fins will be utilized to help guide and steer the booster back to the drone ship.
Bearing separation confirmed.
And confirmation that there you saw it on your screen, the 2 fairing halves have separated, exposing the SXM-7 satellite. If you look closely, you can actually see the fairing disappearing from view in the background there. Currently at T plus 4 minutes and 3 seconds into flight, and we're performing the first of 2 planned MVAC burns. At stage separation, the first stage's velocity is about 2,200 meters per second, or 5,000 meters per hour, pretty fast. Once the first and second stages separate, that first stage is actually still moving at such a high velocity that it continues to raise its altitude as it coasts for a couple of minutes prior to starting its downward return back to Earth.
Acquisition signal, Bermuda.
The next major milestone that we'll be able to see will be that first stage entry burn. For the entry burn, we relight the center engine, which we call E9, and then partway through the transition back through the Earth's atmosphere, we relight 2 more Merlin M1D engines, E1 and E5, to give us a total of 3 M1Ds, helping to slow the vehicle down as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. We're expecting that entry burn to begin in about 1 minute. Trajectory continues to look good there on second stage, carrying the SXM-7 satellite for Sirius XM.
Vehicle is on a nominal trajectory. Gorgeous views of first stage as it has now reoriented itself
coasting through apogee and now returning back down. As I mentioned, we will be performing 2 maneuvers for that landing. First, entry burn coming up in about 10 seconds, followed, of course, by the landing burn on the drone ship.
Stage 1 FTS is safed.
First stage is currently about 50 miles above the Earth's surface.
Stage 1 entry burn has started.
There we can see that the entry burn has begun on the left-hand side of your screen for that first stage re-entry. Again, we start by igniting the center engine first and then reignite 2 more engines to give us a total of 3 engines, allowing us to slow the vehicle down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere.
Entry burn, shut down.
And shutdown of those 3 engines for entry burn. Trajectory continues to look nominal there for second stage on the right-hand side of your screen. I love that view of the MVAC nozzle glowing orange with Earth behind it. Next up, we have a couple of major milestones happening back to back. The start of the landing burn followed immediately by SECO 1, or second engine cutoff 1, on the second stage. SECO is where we shut down that MVAC engine to allow the second stage to coast for a little bit. This event preserves the fuel until we need it for the final burn to take us to our targeted orbit for the SXM-7 satellite. And then about 25 seconds after SECO 1, we'll hopefully have a live view of the first stage touching down.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Touching down on our drone ship, just read the instructions. So we're expecting the landing burn to begin in about 10 seconds and SECO to begin in about 15 seconds.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Everything continued to looking nominal. And there we heard the call out of SECO. And tuning in for that landing on the left-hand side. Hopefully we stick it. Looks like we lost the feed there. We'll try to bring that back to you whenever we have the opportunity. But we did hear the call out that we have good orbit for the second stage. So nominal orbital insertion.
Stage 1 is landed. Landing operators proceed into 11.100 on recovery 1.
We did hear the call out there that the first stage has landed. Unfortunately, we weren't able to bring the video of that as it was over the horizon. And there's that view. Once again, this is the 7th flight and therefore the 7th landing of this particular booster, also marking the 69th successful recovery of a Falcon 9 first stage. The second stage vehicle has just entered its first coast phase, which will last about 18 minutes, and we'll light that MVAC engine for a second time shortly thereafter at T plus 26 minutes and 3 seconds. We're going to take a break here, and as always, if you're interested in keeping an eye on that second stage throughout its coast phase, we'll leave you with an animation. See you back here at T plus 25 minutes.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda. Preparation signal given.
Welcome back to our webcast for the SiriusXM SXM-7 mission. To recap what's happened so far this afternoon, we had a smooth liftoff at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. 2.5 minutes later, our first and second stages successfully separated. The first stage, which made its 7th flight today, landed on our drone ship. Just read the instructions. And the second stage completed its first burn, successfully inserting the SXM-7 and second stage into its planned parking orbit. Right now, we're coming up on the second burn of the upper stage engine here in just a couple of minutes. Currently, the flight computer is commanding the settling thrusters to turn on and off, releasing nitrogen gas that helps lightly push the stage, allowing propellant to stay at the bottom of the tank above the engine, right where we need it. We're expecting that second engine start to occur in a couple of seconds. And there we can see that MVAC engine has ignited. And the nozzle beginning to turn a lovely orange. At this point in time, the second stage will burn for about 45 seconds, adding over 2,000 meters per second to the second stage's speed before shutting it down for a second time. That shutdown event is called SECO 2, or Second Engine Cutoff Number 2. This burn places the SXM satellite into the required orbit prior to separating it from Falcon 9. And we had confirmation that we have a good burn.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And nominal orbit for that second stage. As a reminder for those tuning in, the SXM-7 satellite is still attached to the Falcon 9 second stage. That second stage is now going to start a slow spin, which will help stabilize the SXM-7 satellite when it's released. This transition will take about 5 minutes, with satellite separation at approximately T+31 minutes and 38 seconds. While we'll wait for the satellite to get closer to its final destination, we'll pause commentary for now during this quick coast phase, but we'll come back in just before separation takes place in about 3 minutes. So we'll be back here at T+30 minutes. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our coverage of the SXM-7 mission for SiriusXM. If you're just joining us, we had an on-time launch at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by a successful ascent, stage separation, first stage landing, and 2 second stage engine burns. We have just one more major milestone coming up today, which of course is the deployment of the SXM-7 satellite from the Falcon 9 second stage, which you see there on your screen now. That separation is scheduled to take place about a minute from now. The satellite that we're carrying on board today, the SXM-7, is SiriusXM's next generation high-power broadcasting satellite.
Acquisition of signal HPK.
It was designed to provide service for more than 15 years, and it'll be joining SiriusXM's active fleet to provide audio entertainment and data services to the continental United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbean. It'll be outputting over 8,000 watts of content, meaning it will deliver the highest power density of any commercial satellite on orbit. And it's intended to replace the SXM-3 satellite that is currently on orbit. About 20 seconds away from that payload deployment. There on your screen, we have a great shot of the SXM-7 satellite.
Payload separation confirmed.
And there on your screen, we can see that the payload has separated. We've received confirmation of that successful separation of the SXM-7 satellite from our second stage, which will be bringing our webcast today to a close. Thank you to SiriusXM for entrusting us with the SXM-7 satellite. This mission marked the 7th launch and landing for this particular Falcon 9 booster, SpaceX's 69th successful booster landing, and despite a crazy 2020, our 25th launch this year. To the range and FAA, we appreciate having your support for today's mission. And to all of our viewers, as always, thank you for joining us and have a great day.